with a start. It's late, perhaps midnight? That dream was unsettling, but you can't quite remember it. You do remember that you're staying at a friend's house. The house is very quiet. You feel like you could use a pick-me-up, but you don't want to wake up your friend. Their family doesn't have soda anyway. There should be a corner store nearby. Against your better judgment, you put on your shoes and prepare to take a short walk. You make sure to check for the key under the rock near the front door so you can get back in. Walking this late is eerie, but also quite calming. You have the night all to yourself. To approach the store only to realize you didn't bring your wallet. But kneeling in front of the store, you think you see some bite you recognize. Maybe it'll spot you. It's Fantasia Bite of the Fluffbyte entertainment system. She gives you a timid hello as you tell her how much you like her videos. Once past the common pleasantries, you awkwardly explain your situation and ask if she can maybe, sorta, kinda, buy you something to drink. You promise to like and subscribe. She's a bit reluctant, but says you can strike a deal. You listen to her essay that she's afraid of finishing, and she'll buy a soda. Sure, what choice do you have but to agree to her terms?
As you grow up, you're reminded pretty consistently that there will always be someone bigger than you. Some might take solace in the thought that no one has no one bigger than them to answer to. Your siblings answer to your parents answer to each other, but also their boss, or the economy, or the president. But who's the president answer to? Well, I think it's supposed to be Congress, but I distinctly remember government officials tend to lay each other off the hook all the time, so it can't possibly be that. It's slow, but eventually you do learn some people have a boss, and that folks that live the most freely have a lot of money and don't really have to answer to anyone. But those people are very rare. Once you get to a certain age, you're supposed to just assimilate into a position in a hierarchy. And just kind of make the most of it. You're just supposed to hope that you don't go to the bottom. You fight tooth and nail not to be completely powerless, and to hang on to the little bit of power you do have. Welcome to the nightmare of the disenfranchised. If a parent is God in the eyes of a child, then what becomes of a child who ascends to adulthood? They'd become God in the eyes of their children. Or a god with no acolytes. An empty ego. Think about how, as a kid, being a grown-up is awe-inspiring. Anything an adult teaches you is like Prometheus bringing fire to humans. Though normally, it's but a very tiny spark instead of a ball of fire. Oh, did you know why the sky is blue? Hey, I bet you didn't know that grass breathes. You want to know how electric current works? Like a magic trick. They never share enough to betray the other grown-ups. The concept of God is a great stand-in for authority figures and hierarchy in general. In fact, a lot of human behavior has been influenced in no small part by religion that proclaimed that someone else bigger and smarter and omnipotent knew the world better and someone was doing it all wrong. And we had to let them know, we had to make these tenets to let them know that they're being bad, and that you should punish them for being bad. Humans elevated a concept to be the big boss daddy for everyone. Hey, I don't make the rules. I'm just prescribing God's word. Because like a cop, a little power is better than no power at all. And it's not like being sandwiched in the middle of a power hierarchy doesn't have its benefits. People aren't gonna complain even when they're staring the hypocrisy right in the face. And hey, the closer you are to the top of the hierarchy, the more you can dictate how rules are handled and interpret it for those below you. Heck, the Catholic Church used to let normal congregation members even read the Bible. Because the president or mommy or daddy or God doesn't have time to deal with you, they just prescribe someone to deal with you. You're not important enough. As an individual, you're just a child. But what happens when you ascend and see there is no God? Just a machine and people holding on to its standards in order to eat. People operating the machine and not even giving out scraps sometimes. Do we tell every bite the shadows on the cave walls are an illusion? That the framework that we've all been fed is a lie? Or do we make our own shadow puppets? Do we become the parent, the god, the hierarchical figure to determine how things are doled out? If there is no God around, then the next best thing is a de facto God. God is dead. God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderer of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owned has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off of us? What water is there for us to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement? What sacred games shall we have to invent? Is not the greatness of this deed too great for even us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? Overdoing it? We live in a world where the concept and power of God is highly debated. It's fine to be agnostic or atheist, depending on where you live. This is the most post-God world that's ever existed for humans. Though at the same time, evangelizing is still a strong recourse for many. To the point where some people believe that their rights as certain religious people are being destroyed because other people get to have their space to worship what they do, or not do it all. Of course, folks will strive for meaning regardless. Even if someone's not religious, that doesn't mean they don't have a personal doctrine. And everyone finds it in different places. We all try to make our own meanings, as folks always have and always will. But hierarchy doesn't stop existing just because someone doesn't believe in it. Laws, rules, and various moral frameworks still insist that, just by merely existing, that certain folks or certain things shouldn't be done. Laws, rules, and various moral frameworks all insist that just by merely existing, that certain things just shouldn't be done, often framed within certain values. It all starts to feel oddly similar. It's not up for debate. My house, my government, my society, my culture, my rules. If you want to change the rules, get to the top, huh? Pay your dues. Get big. This is what the nation was founded upon, after all. Freedom and justice for some. You can pursue happiness, but gosh, you're not gonna attain it. No one ever promised you that. If God is hierarchy personified, then its opposite would be the personification of rebellion, then, wouldn't it? The devil is an anarchist, and I think she's to die for. But seriously, once I thought about it this way, it got real fidgety. Not only because so many things have historically been seen as demon-related that were misunderstood or tabooified, like the Salem witch trials or mental illness in general, but because queer culture's reclamation of demons and monsters seems so much more dense in that context. It's not that we were shunned by God per se, or we were cursed with evilness. It's that our existence flies in the face of what the hierarchy wants. It's a contradiction to the notion that everything in the hierarchies... It's the contradiction to some of the notions that the hierarchy preaches. Not to mention that queer people and many other marginalized folks are hard to control, given we seldom fit neatly into society's expectations for work and family. So it actually comes as no surprise that marginalized groups are often infantilized. Savages who can't think for themselves. mentally ill people who are a danger to themselves and others, queer people who will harm and indoctrinate your children. Wait, that last one doesn't fit. Sorry, that was subconscious. Tender queers who dress like they shop at Hot Topic and can't possibly find a job and need to kickstart all their finances. I'm bad at insults for things I don't believe. I like thinking that the queer association with demons is an inheritance, not just finding identity and being discarded. We were already whole. We were discarded because we could never truly comply, even when we try to be straight or neurotypical or white. A similar comparison could be made between rebellion and youth, as youthful voices tend to question what came before, and to question the ubiquitousness, and to question the ubiquitousness is heresy. Why, only a devil would do that, right? Of course, being queer and youthful are some of my favorite parts of our identity. Identities? Whatever. So, it kind of gets me thinking about the concept of dethroning God, especially while being a queer kid. And what's more gay and obsessed with dethroning God than JRPGs? So it's really common for JRPGs to have a cast of mostly young people and to end up with a boss fight with God or a god-like entity. Sometimes it's a recently ascended god-like figure even. Sometimes it's something with a god motif, or quite commonly it's just the Catholic Church, like just the Catholic Church. But sometimes it's like literally the god of that world. Sometimes it's even metatextual. JRPGs are known for having anti-religious plots pretty often. I don't know if it's so common because of a history of foreign occupations in Japan that tried to convert folks over to a religion they never asked for on top of everything else that's bad about colonization. But it's just a trait of the genre that pretty much everyone accepts. And I mean, there's a lot of alternative folks that play JRPGs, so it's not surprising that it's such a welcome theme. Especially with a lot of people being brought up on those type of games, also getting their own religious trauma and wanting to kind of say things about it through their art too. But like anime, I think the term JRPG encapsulates a style of game more than just a denotation of where a game comes from. So when I played Junk Heavensent Apocalypse, I immediately put in the JRPG bots in my head, as you do, and it's kind of just sitting there, and that's the stuff like Chrono Trigger and Persona 5. To be honest, also, it's in a bot's nest of Homestuck and Metal Saga, but that's not reflected as much in the game's messaging as it is in its aesthetic and environment. In the world of Junk, you're part of a party of orphan children who were spared from being destroyed when the apocalypse hit Earth. God thinks humans are scum, so she wiped us out again. I guess she saw too many "We Are the Virus" memes. It's typical for an RPG like this to have such an antagonist, but even the dev said that this game has the codename Kids Next Door influence, and so that kind of percolated with the anti-religious themes in my head, and kind of became a anti-hierarchy theming. Aesthetically, the 2x4 technology-inspired tech is obviously worn on the game's sleeve. Our party's weaponry has it, but they even have a party member that's made of junk. And Kids Next Door is low-key anarchist, or at the very least, high-key anti-anarchy. So, having essentially the orphan kids next door fighting God just kind of felt like the ultimate fuck you to authority. Though obviously a non-bab anarchist might say that the adults are a just hierarchy, and so that one doesn't need to be usurped. Though even if I were to agree, which I don't, that doesn't mean that their power should go unhabitually questioned. In fact, I literally wrote an essay about it, because absolute power absolutely corrupts. And that's the issue with hierarchy. It tends to tread all over autonomy. Peter Pan and the Lost Boys are kind of like, fudge, you got mine. While the Kids Next Door were more like, hey, let's organize and topple the tyranny of adulthood together. No kid left behind. Admittedly, there was a chain of command within the organization, so it's not without its flaws, but the K&D took rebellion much more seriously than any similarly minded group that I can think of in, at least children's animation. The way the party in Junk talks of God before we see her feels like a very, very personal kind of hate.
Hey, Ramirez, right? How'd you get here anyway? Thought me, Solstice, and Harold were the only humans left. I just escaped my orphanage and the skies began to rain fire or something? Before I knew it, I was being plunged up into the sky. Eventually, I entered these silver-looking things. That's all I really remember. Checks out. Me and Solstice had a similar experience. My guess is those weird silver things were portals or something? Leading us to Otherworld. Wait. Ramirez? Was there anything else? I heard a voice. And while it was distorted beyond reason, the message was clear. Oh yeah, there was a really impertinent sounding voice declaring humans a mistake of the gods and a bunch of stuff. I was scared enough as it was. Damn it. So it makes it virtually impossible to deny. It was not her doing, but the doing of the heavens themselves. Some god preaching benevolence while sentencing orphans to this gruesome fate? If this is the resolve the heavens have to offer, then the floaty hag can go choke on her damn scarves. Whoa, what are you talking about? Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to snap.
The way the party in Junk talks about God before we see her feels like a very, very personal kind of hate. Something that can only be done in fiction, where God is a tangible force. A hate we've seen in adults and children alike, even in Flesh-based, when talking about how unfair God is. But it's more the influence of God and the idea of God in real life that does damage. How it's being used to oppress others and justify terrible treatment. But in Junk, it's a personal hate because not only has a bunch of evil been done in this person's name, but God is indisputably real, so they could have stopped it at any time. So it reads kind of like, golly gee, God stepped on my shoe the other day and grinned. I sure hate that bitch. As one might expect in a game where you can talk to God, one does get to vent about how the world is unfair, since without much trouble, God can fix everything. Just like how someone like Jeff Bezos could stop world hunger without even putting a dent in his finances. But he simply doesn't. It kind of draws attention to the fact that it's not like the fight was ever going to be fair. I mean, this is God we're talking about. The plot of Junk revolves around God, named Junko, trying to convince apparently the last humans, your party, to devoutly accept paradise or else suffer in a terrible wasteland as punishment for being people. This really feels a lot like, hey, kill your son. Okay, no, don't do it. I was just fucking with you. I just wanted to see if you would.
Junko, show yourself. You impetuous hag. The heck was that for? You mean the rat? That would have been a key to your survival. Only those that accept the guiding hand of the heavens are allowed forgiveness. That voice! You're her! You're the one who deemed humanity a mistake from the gods! You lived your life in an orphanage which made every waking moment hell. The food served was so bad you were pleased with the slop Harold could scrounge together. The fact you appear surprised at such a sentiment is the only real shocker here. You think humans are a mistake of the gods? Why don't you take a look upon your own behavior? You forced us into suffering for years, all in a vain attempt to win us over to the side of heaven. You've proven you can be just as cruel, if not crueler, than any orphanage we've known. So if humanity is a mistake of the gods, then so are you. Haha, get in flannel. Taking away life just because it may sustain ours? What kind of immortal sadist are you posing as? If this is the sort of behavior I can expect from heaven, then I want no part of it. I tried to understand you, Junko. Every time you did something awful, I tried to figure out a reason behind it. Truth is, you have no reason. You're just a racist slob. You hate humans regardless of heritage or behavior. Janky, meanwhile, is just enjoying this energy. Oh, goodness gracious. You're acting like morons. The fact that you still live means I believe you're worthy to join me in heaven. No more war. No more greed. No more lies. No more brutality. An end to suffering. I am but a messenger, here to offer you bliss. Humanity may be a mistake, but you three are clearly a little different. I've considered it, Junko. I've thought long and hard about it. It would mean a lot to me to escape the suffering and enter the bliss you've offered us so many times before. But the answer is still no. Accept it and leave us alone. I can never attain bliss through someone so arrogant as you. Fuck off, deadbeat float hag. The only person who gets to dictate my life is me. I actually hate you more than Junkeep. I really don't know how you manage that, but hey. Congratulations, I guess. You came first in something. The people I despise the most list. What about you, newcomer? Are you not seeking an escape from this hell? You've seriously never been told no very much, have you? You just killed my rat, ruined me and my friend's chance of living, and yet you want me to join you in some stupid promise of bliss? Go drink a basin full of your own vomit, you impetuous preacher. This world may be hell, but it's a hell I've made friends in. I'll sooner die with them than join whatever heck you're supposed to be a part of. You see, no amount of suffering will make us bend the knee. Such a shame. This was your final chance for penance. It saddens me, it really does. I thought all of humanity would not be beyond salvation. But, if this is your answer, then so be it. My tolerance for your insults and rejections has peaked. You will join the fish in their ghostly march.
Congratulations! I would say no too, even before playing this game. I've never been a fan of the carrot and stick, to be completely honest. We think about stuff like this a lot, pretty much ever since we stopped believing in God. If submitting was all it takes to be in the good graces of a hierarchical master, then what's the use of not swallowing your pride? You're making yourself suffer after all. Well, punishment for having free will just feels kinda meh. It's a catch-22, and it's not fair. And I guess life isn't supposed to be fair, but when you're talking about celestial beings that can choose whether people live or die and the quality of that life, it just... too much is on the line to trivialize the choices that everyone has to make every day and paint it as a simple black and white. Because they weren't devout and following your will. But sometimes I would just say that if you reject an offer like this on principle, I can see where you're coming from too. You don't have to have a big ideological reasoning for it. Forcing your will on another person, coercing them, and trying to tell them that it's their fault and that they should just seek forgiveness is kind of abusive, I guess. It's being made to say sorry for something that's not your fault and having your face rubbed in it, and then having to agree that you deserve it. It's the worst kind of gaslighting. Junko is pretentious, assumptive, and self-entitled. Junko is your shitty mom as God personified. She's easy to loathe. She doesn't care about you or your friends and their suffering. She just wants to be right and bathe in the adoration. The praise. It reminded us of the thing that made us stop believing in God originally. A graphic novel memoir called Blankets about a boy growing up and coming to realize that he's gay but also doesn't believe in God, which he knows will ostracize him from his family. He just doesn't know which one will do it more. Ironically, we started reading it because it was anti-Christian. We didn't even know it was gay till the character came out within its pages. One part in particular detailed how the author was told that existence would be very specific in heaven. Then in heaven you'll be filled with joy and will sing every moment to praise God. The boy asked if there would be anything else to do, but he was told that nope, that would be all he wanted to do. Does anyone have an idea what we might be doing in heaven? Relaxing like on a vacation? Snowmobiling. Football. Drawing? Oh, Craig, draw for all eternity? It's a perfect place, right? Wouldn't we be like doing what we like to do anyway? Well, indeed, we'll be busy, and indeed, we'll enjoy our labor, because we won't fatigue or grow distracted like we do on earth. But our new lives in heaven will be devoted to praising and worshiping God, bowing to Him, singing Him songs, and exclaiming His name for all eternity. And we'll love every second of it, because of all he's done for us. But I can't sing. In heaven, you'll have a beautiful voice. But I don't like to sing. Couldn't I praise God with my drawings? I mean, come on, Craig. How can you praise God with drawings? So, as I was saying, we'll be working, not relaxing. But we'll love it and... Yes, Craig. Draw his creation, like trees and stuff. But Craig, he's already drawn it for us. Hearing that, it sounded like hell. Being happy but not caring about anything I care about now? That'd be like being mind controlled, right? Just staying there stroking a massive ego? And it's not like there's a passage in the Bible that says that this is the case. Just like the concepts of, say, your loved ones watching you from heaven. But to us, the notion that it's such a widely held headcanon is kind of pathetic if you think about it. To need that much adoration from everyone? More than trillions of lives all across human history. And the only ones worthy of absolution from pain for eternity are the ones that kiss your ass 24/7? Gosh, if that's the case, God's worse than a VTuber. But what was worse? We knew people, too many people, who would have been fine with a heaven like that. Or a God like that. Not even pushing up against it. Not even when it felt so icky. Good God-fearing Christians. A God that seemed to have a doctrine that often saw how we were and what we were as immoral and wrong. As a closeted queer kid, we had to be pretty careful about who we found solace in. The things that would give us away and the few places we found that solace were pretty anti-religion. Go figure. The more we found that solace, the more the absence of that authority, or that panopticonish societal self-hatred, the lacking of it made us feel a lot more free. Being able to express disdain with it was nice. And it shaped a lot of our values and our tastes even now. And those values and tastes have stayed consistent in a lot of ways. They haven't just changed as we got older. Our fire of rebellion was very much stoked by video games, even more recently. Our fire of rebellion was very much stoked by Persona 5. We fell in love with the Persona series because of its young protagonist doing what adults couldn't, all the while being manipulated by those adults to do their bidding and eventually breaking free. The Persona 5 plot follows a group of alienated teenagers who have all been victimized by adults who are protected by corrupt systems. No one believes the kids' words against anyone else's. They're outcasts in one way or another, all of them. And they seek to reshape society and fight the wrongs that the filthy, power-hungry adults have inflicted. Using the power of Persona to perform heists on the very adults' filthy desires, and using a metaverse? Is it called the metaverse of Persona 5? I forget. Wait. Yeah, it's called the metaverse in Persona 5. I looked it up. Oh boy. Oh yeah, they use they go through a supernatural dimension called the metaverse to affect the different adults' psyches, and like in anime Inception, change how they think about themselves and make them actually confess their lies and crimes with their filthy mouths. Pushing the rebellion theming even further, red and black are the primary colors of the game and its branding. And it feels very anarchist. Truth is, just like many media properties that wear rebellion as a mighty banner on their sleeves, change isn't really the goal. It's just a capitalist recuperation to make you feel like you're fighting back against authority. And of course, as escapism, that's not really the problem. But what is disappointing, especially considering even the story, the status quo doesn't really fundamentally change. And that's a shame, since the final boss of Persona 5 is a godlike and basically societal influential figure. It's a supernatural cup. It's supernatural cup. It's a supernatural cup that is controlling the collective unconscious of the Japanese population. It's kind of like that big heart in Berserk. Anyway, the ending gives off a feeling that the world is the Phantom Thieves' oyster, something that can continue to change, that they can continue to have influence in, even if they don't have powers anymore. Which is somewhat undercut by Saionejima telling the thieves that they should just leave the rest of the whole justice thing to adults, and they can actually trust adults to, like, do right by them now. Which, I mean, doesn't really make any sense. It's wishful thinking.
It'll be difficult to prosecute him immediately, but I'll do this thoroughly until the causality between his other crimes can be proven. I believe Wakaba-san's research results will save Japan.
We could testify too, you know?
Thank you, but I'll be fine. I don't want to add any more unwanted suspicions on any of you. It's about time you let us adults prove that we can get our act together. Of course, I plan on doing everything I can. I will protect you all this time. Prosecuting Shido is that first step.
And that's a valuable message in and of itself, of telling gamers who constantly jump into escapism and young people that connect with the characters and the need for social change, that they don't need superpowers in order to enact that change, and they can do more than just play a video game to achieve it. But to imply that there's a bunch of good adults that fits everything and you don't have to worry until you're an adult kind of makes me sad, considering a general tenet of being young, according to adults, is that you shouldn't worry about the problems of the world until you're older. Your job is to just get good grades and stay out of trouble. At least that's what we were told all the time.
To stay below 1.5 degrees, we need to keep the carbon in the ground. Only setting up distant dates and saying things which give the impression of that action is underway will most likely do more harm than good, because the changes required are still nowhere in sight. The politics needed does not exist today, despite what you might hear from world leaders. And I still believe that the biggest danger is not inaction. The real danger is when politicians and CEOs are making it look like real action is happening, when in fact almost nothing is being done apart from clever accounting and creative PR.
This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering, people are dying, entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth.
It is always easier to get people to rally around a problem than it is to get them to rally around a solution. When it comes to big problems, you should actually be providing real solutions, not nonsense, and then trotting out children to claim that if you don't embrace solutions that literally no one is willing to embrace, right? Al Gore would not implement that. He would not. If you were president of the United States, he would not. The Paris Accords were not this. There's not an adult on the planet who sees this proposal as anything other than patently insane, and yet they're all out there like Greta Thunberg, hero of the Republic.
You're told constantly that things will be fine, but obviously things are not fine. You've led social and economical change has happened because people didn't sit down and say, oh, it's fine, we can just wait. And even when they were doing it, they're routinely repressed and trivialized. And people still are. Sometimes just giving a platform to people who are pushing against the status quo is done just to delegitimize their movements in the first place. Especially in an infantilistic manner. If someone waits around to be told it's okay to make social changes, then those changes will never come. Because the revolution doesn't come by following the rules and being told when and where to stand. Being told to wait till you're an adult to push for change is a great way to get indoctrinated in that entrenching system that makes you just push for prosperity for yourself and fudge everyone else. I just need to make sure I have a roof over my head. Fighting for our little scraps instead of all together for the things we deserve. JRPGs the world over have a very rebellious message, and that won't change. And I like that about them. It's kind of a nice staple in the genre. Just like how Resident Evil 3's anti-capitalist messaging still rings true despite being made by a capitalist company. Both times. However, in Persona 5's case, we think that it gets even worse when you go into Persona 5 Royal. In the end, it seems that the Phantom Thieves weren't so interested in justice after all. More like their own vindication. And that becomes much more clear with the added content. Any sense of being able to change the world can be snuffed out with the onset of adulthood, higher education, employment, and all the other things that chain us all to this unfair hierarchy. By capitalism standards, the best change you can do is getting a position to control others, it seems. The reality of P5 Royal made it much more clear that the thieves weren't trying to reform society. They just wanted their personal wrongs righted. Wrongs that should have never been able to happen. But the thieves didn't fight to correct the system or topple the system that made those wrongs possible in the first place. They just wanted retribution.
As a general rule, I'm opposed to any sort of higher authority making choices for other people's lives, whether that be a politician, a government, or a god. Even if the choices are things I like and think are good, that's still not their choice to make. And you might think, well, I already got rid of Yaldabaoth, so except getting rid of Yaldabaoth, as we've already explored, changed fuck all. The choice they're being offered, as I see it, is to live in a world ruled by an opaque, untouchable authority limiting their freedom, or the world Maruki's offering them, where they're being ruled by an opaque, untouchable authority limiting their freedom, but benevolence this time. And I guess they have to resist Maruki, because even if he may be benevolent, he's still an authority limiting their freedom with obtuse and arbitrary restrictions on the organization of their reality and society. But that's already the world they live in. That's already the world we live in. I feel like there's surely a better way or a more interesting answer than just no, fuck you, put it back. And even if there wasn't any other such choice, well then, I'd have to opt for benevolent authority such as this over the current neoliberal order of alternating between caustic negligence and outright violence. This is the better world that you'd think the Phantom Thieves would want, would be aiming for, and they reject it. They decide that they'd rather have the old world, with all the pain and suffering it entailed, that they'd rather choose to live with that pain and have the choice to decide their path forward. Sure, they want all the changes that Maruki is offering them in this new reality, but they shake their heads, saying, no, 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 we can't deny the real in order to satisfy our desires. And it's not like they don't get that Maruki's reality is benefiting people, or even that they think the other world is better. They just kind of don't care.
You know, there probably are plenty of people who'd ultimately benefit from your reality. But what about the people who want to take on the world themselves? How's it right to rob them of their opportunities?
Sure, Maruki shouldn't necessarily choose for everyone, but then why should the Phantom Thieves? We're never given a satisfactory answer to this. This choice is too complicated for Persona 5's liberal outlook, and the best answer it can come up with is seriously, this is too much of a change. This is too big and scary of a change all at once. Just put it back. And as for why the Phantom Thieves are fine with making this choice, well, I can only come up with one answer, and I hate it. It's this. The Phantom Thieves don't actually give a shit about saving society. And if you really think about it, They never did they? They sure pretended to, but at the end of it all they cared about was winning the day so they could go back to hanging out at LeBlanc, living out their youth with a delicious cup of coffee. They only ever cared about the game's villains because they specifically were being directly threatened. And when their lives weren't at stake, they were on the hunt for a target because they wanted to increase their notoriety. They didn't defeat Kamoshida to help their fellow students, they did it because Ryuji held a grudge and An was being harassed. They didn't defeat Shido to save Japan, they defeated Shido to save their skin. They didn't defeat Yaldmouth to reform society, they defeated Yaldmouth to get society to stop turning a blind eye to Shido's case, and nothing more. And they're only defeating Maruki now, not because they think it's better for the world, but because of their own selfish reasons. These are, after all, the same kids who only decided to keep being phantom thieves after the Kamoshida case because some snobby adults were rude to them at an expensive buffet. This is not a choice they're making with actual stakes to their lives, like with the rest of their targets in the original game. It's purely a personal exercise to them, a kind of surreal thought experiment, as opposed to the meaningful material choice that this would be if they were socially disadvantaged minorities in more than my headcanons. They've got their justice and the justice of their immediate friends, and beyond that, they don't actually care.
The thieves are actually okay with the status quo if it doesn't hurt them or their loved ones. Hot take, I know. They're okay with the world changing, but not too much. Because, like the adults that they used to fight, they think they know better, and no one else deserves a say in how the world works. Even though rebellion by young people scratches an itch in us to revolt against the hierarchy of God and the potty alike, it's sad that stories so often have teenagers and preteens be the primary cast, relegating adults to be mentors, NPCs, and the occasional one-off oldest party member are what you're gonna expect from a typical JRPG. Sometimes it makes us feel like no one would buy into a bunch of adults doing some guy killing, but that's obviously not true. But sometimes seeing adults in these stories so little doubles down on a bad feeling we get that society tries to also reinforce. The rebellion is for children, and toppling God is out of reach. For the will of someone higher to do. Someone more important, more privileged. But we can't shape the world. It's juvenile to think so. And that's always a shadow cast across our doorstep. But of course the only way to kill God in that case is to become them, isn't it? To assume the role of hierarchy. That's what so many people believe. Time skip to the hero as the mentor character in the next game. Just clinging on to that small bit of power. But not all rebellions are big. Even a small rebellion is worth something. Sword of the Necromancer is an action RPG roguelike dungeon crawler about a woman fighting to resurrect her lost love. Whoa, that was a mouthful. And a very queer take on many of the themes Shadow of the Colossus tries to tackle, a fantasy, especially medieval setting, is usually really great for wish fulfillment. But often, there are those, like queer, disabled, and BIPOC folk, that have some trouble losing themselves in a world that they know would not tolerate them. Or, rather, tolerates us less than the current one? The cis-het white default is very useful for not having to rub up against those unforgettable realities. So, usually, characters are not any of those things. But, for Sword of the Necromancer, the state of homophobia in the world is kind of part of the world building.
The High Priest is the light that guides the Nodum faithful. Many come to the temple in search of aid. I have been assisting Father in his tasks, and what do you think I have seen? My father has not helped anyone. He has only ever relied on the scriptures and recited empty words. Words that momentarily soothe the hearts of those who came in search of relief, but hold no weight and make no real difference in their daily lives.
Maybe the same could be said about all religions. I've never felt anything for anyone before, so I don't really know what to expect from this.
Just before, you said you did not know if this would cause us trouble. What did you mean?
Well, we're both women. I think you understand what I mean. Doesn't that book of yours say something about that?
This is not an instruction manual for life. This book contains what the gods left us as a legacy. Stories of how the world was created and the laws that govern it.
There's a chapter on the union of male and female or something, right? My parents explained those things to me when I was a child. They were quite devout, so I always thought it was part of the scriptures.
Yes, of course it addresses that topic. That is how new life is created.
Then the other kinds of unions aren't allowed, are they?
At no time did the gods leave us guidelines like those. I understand your concern. You think that what happened last night goes against the will of the gods, but I can assure you that it does not. Believe me, I have spent a whole life reading this.
It's not like that. After all, I don't give a fuck about what the Nodom have to say. I don't believe in that sort of thing. I live life as I damn well please. But you believe in them, so I thought that maybe...
If gods created love, and I can feel that love for you, what can be wrong with that? Who are we to cast doubts on the gods' creation? As long as you want to accept my love as well, then I do not have any objections. Even if we are both women, that changes nothing.
Coco, I just don't want your people to think you're a heretic. Like the necromancer of your stories.
Worry not. Their understanding means nothing to me. We should feel free to love and be loved.
A lot of fantasy ignores homophobia by either not having it exist or having the cast not have to deal with it. The romance element takes into account what I'm used to seeing played off for comedy, and it really works. That trepidation, that fear, not only of basic rejection, but like being alone and being hated. It feels emotionally authentic. Oftentimes, unfortunately, the act of love is a rebellion in and of itself. As religion has been a driving force for homophobia, seeing queer characters having a conflict with religion strikes a chord. It's just nice to see. And of course, the happy flashbacks that you see throughout the game will lead to a sour ending, as they kind of have to in order for our hero to want to resurrect her lost love in the first place. But I won't spoil any more of the game here in case you want to see where it goes. But as the point of the game is to spit in the face of death and resurrect your lost love, I had to at least mention this whole rebellion talk. And it is an RPG. And the characters are adults, which is nice. I like using recent games to illustrate how ubiquitous these ideas are because, well, war never changes. I don't have to go to the nice touchstones for anti-religious sentiment and kids killing God. I can pick stuff in the last few years. Or decade. Thinking about how often fantasy is used as an outlet for those who have little to no control of their lives, it's no wonder that anti-religious and anti-hierarchical things come up in JRPGs so much. It's not just that it has to be in fantasy either, though. Sci-fi, especially high-concept sci-fi, can easily be a reflection of fantasy. It's more the nuances that attract folks to one or the other. The nuance about sci-fi that I like is the imagining of progress. Of course, not just technology, but socially. After all, it's a dream for many folks like us to imagine a world where we have an idealized form and it's accepted by society and achievable through technology safely, let alone to be able to live in a post-racist, post-homophobic, post-ableist world. And sci-fi, at least in an escapist sense, does promise a certain air of plausibility that is a little harder to find in typical fantasy. Which may be why a primary fantasy in now is, well, being isekai'd into a fantasy world that you love. Or at least are better at living in. You can't imagine the world getting any better, so you have to be transported to a world that is already better. However, ironically, sci-fi RPGs tend to temper that perfect future, because they're almost always dystopias. Most sci-fi visions of the future are laced with pragmatism and pessimism, which, I mean, isn't surprising given the current world we live in. The number of dirty dystopias where I can be a trans Lombat squared are quite vast in number, but the number of wholesome RPG futures, I can probably only count on one paw. But as long as we're talking RPG dystopias, let's see what god we can kill. Oh, the government! Yay! I love killing the government. In Cosmic Star Heroine! Welcome to Cosmic Star Heroine, a game that literally is about a secret agent who decides to overthrow her corrupt government. Her corrupt government that's nothing like what we have here in our quaint dystopia of the 2020s. Cosmic Star Heroine was actually one of the first games we ever streamed, though we never finished it. Maybe we'll get around to it someday. It's nice to see a bunch of adults attacking hierarchy, especially in the case of Cosmic Star Heroine, where you aren't just someone in the lower class with no choice, but a government pawn with plenty of social currency who leads a revolt at the very hand that feeds her. It's the same hand that not only withholds and leaves undesirables to die, but actively misleads its people and hurts them. I mean, it's a little mustache twirly, but it gets the job done. Thing is, our main character doesn't have to revolt. She can have a nice life and even be a war hero.
I've been inspecting you.
Steel!
So hasty, before you do anything rash, wanna have a few words with your friend?
Sorry, Alyssa. Dave!
We haven't found the Gunmancer yet, but it's only a matter of time. Now, if you don't want me to execute your friend on the spot, you'll give yourself up without a fight.
Don't do it, Alyssa! Save yourself!
Can you hear me? I'm with Astrium. We've got things under control. Play along with them for now. We'll get you two without a scratch.
Very well. I concede defeat.
Smart girl, although it was rather foolhardy of you to show up here in the first place. Coming to a well-known Astrium meeting spot, you are practically asking to be captured. Pursuant to the Agency of Peace and the Intelligence Loyalty Act of 2959, all traitors are to be dealt with a public execution. But giving you years of exemplary service before you lost your mind, I'm willing to sweeten the deal.
What do you have in mind?
A martyr makes for a better public narrative than a mere execution. And if you play nice, I might even let your friends go. At this wonderful festival, we celebrate the freedom that we have under the watchful eye of the Agency of Peace and Intelligence. For many years, the brave and selfless members of the agency have worked tirelessly to secure our shared freedom. Why, just a few days ago, a brave agent defeated evil and saved our wonderful city from total destruction. And today, I'd like to introduce you to that agent. Please welcome the true heroine of our time, Alyssa LaSalle.
But despite her government wanting to give her a pat on the head and accolades as a war hero, she can't be swayed. Once she learns the truth of what the government does, she can't just accept it, and defects almost immediately. This feels like the golden child finding out they benefit from having all the other kids' cookies stolen and fed to them. So they immediately swear off cookies. Or at least government-funded cookies. I think we're more likely to see RPGs where there are adults toppling a government than toppling God, because, well, the government is the god of adults. But they're honestly one and the same, just hierarchy of different levels. The law, much like the rule of God, is supposed to go unquestioned in society. It's why breaking the law is seen as a moral failing. That's very purposeful. By associating certain types of people with crime, people can be dehumanized. In our world, they very much have.
The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did.
Can't say a group is bad on general principle anymore? Oh, just label them drug addicts. Don't want someone to exist in public? Frame them as dangerous to women and children. Hell, make it illegal or highly scrutinized for them to be visible in public at all, even as children. Don't want to take responsibility for those you subjugated for generations and stole land from? Assign them plots of land with terrible conditions and call it reparations. Don't want to help those who come to your kingdom because of the conditions in the world you helped aggravate? Persecute them for trespassing, then throw them in cages and separate them from... Persecute them for trespassing, throw them in cages and say it's for their own good. Anyway, God will just do what they want, and they'll just find a way to justify it later. Just like a parent to a child. My house, my rules. Don't like it, get your own house. Wow, this leads to a pretty similar place to my last essay. Well, my essay before the Bridget essay. The lies of adulthood are pervasive and terrifying. Having a childlike mindset and, of course, listening to children is imperative to seeing outside the indoctrinated perspective that adulthood swaddles you in. The best thing our society ever did to cut dissent at the root was to label rebelliousness as a childlike endeavor to grow out of, implying that if you are rebelling, then you're obviously being juvenile. School's greatest benefit to the powers that be was to condition us to follow orders. We only get to pee when we're given permission, to be respectful even when our needs are being ignored. You get used to having a leash on your bodily autonomy, and then you move from school to the workforce and one group just hands off your leash to the other one. You learn to value productivity over most things, even at the cost of mental and physical health. And even if you have a job that you control your own hours and are your own boss technically, you still don't hold your own leash. Hell, Santa Claus instills in us the expectation of always being watched, expecting prosperity as long as you follow orders and never complain. Never pout. At the risk of sounding inconclusive, why do kids so often get to kill gods in games? Only a kid could see God for who she really is behind Oz's curtain. A snake oil seller who took power and hoarded it, judges with it, and encourages people to work against each other so that they'll never work against her. That's why it's of the best interest of God to keep us ignorant, keep us away from the knowledge that we are equal. If not for that, then get us too scared to act against their interests. Kids get to kill God because by the time you become an adult, you've been convinced nothing can change, or that nothing should. You couldn't kill God even if you wanted to. No surprise then that youth is held up as an uncontrollable force. It has to be framed as something bad. Youth is framed as the cause of what's wrong in society, regardless of the generation. Despite this framing on both sides, young people are incredibly important. You're young, you don't have to work. You need to fight for the revolution, is what we heard even growing up. Once you're yoked by society's threat of making a living or dying, it feels like disrupting that would be too much of a risk. Young people aren't just important because of a youthful fervor or idealism or curiosity or even hopefulness. They haven't been indoctrinated, or their indoctrination hasn't finished yet. Pushing up against these power structures is a lot more natural. And not only that, the power structures haven't dug into you yet. I remember when we were in college and the 99% movement had just started. It would have taken about 48 hours to get from where our school was to New York to protest. But folks were organizing a trip and we wouldn't have had to go alone. Sometimes they go for the whole week. It was important. It felt like we were witnessing the edges of something really amazing and historical. We were being taught about the very corrupt power structures that were being rallied against at that same time by members of our community. Even teachers at our liberal arts school were trying to support the movement in ways that they could. But we didn't go to Protest Wall Street. We had too much homework. We're already buried in it, and we were on a number of grants. If we didn't graduate in 4 years, we wouldn't have the funds to finish, so we didn't go. We were so excited about seeing something come to pass that we only dreamed of, and being a young adult at just the right time to experience it was kind of gratifying. Especially given how we were brought up to believe that we would participate in revolution, to hold that as a really strong belief. But at the same time, we didn't want to squander our nebulous future. We thought about our mostly white liberal friends and how they were fighting for us too. And it felt like it was okay to stay behind and be the responsible kid. Though all the kids who went got good grades, at least as far as we knew. Even some who kind of partied all the time. At least that's how it seemed. We often wonder how they did it. How they balanced school life, social life, and activism. It was already the start of what adulthood would show us. About how hard it is to stay on top of trying to enact change when the world is already demanding so much of you. Being neurodivergent didn't help us with the varying responsibilities we had at the time. In the end, some folks will say that the movement was stupid and childish even to this day. And in the end, we dropped out of school because of our mental health going so bad that we couldn't stay stable at all. So in the end, us not going to Occupy Wall Street actually didn't change anything. It is a major regret. Later on, years later, we lived in Los Angeles and the Women's March had happened. You know, the first one that happened in response to Trump gloating about getting away with sexual assault. We wanted to be a part of that protest. Make ways of difference. Really act as a leftist. I remember putting on our work uniform and pouting. Wading through a sea of people who seemed to want change. But I had to step on a bus and go to work. We had to pay bills. We couldn't get that day off. Even when we asked weeks in advance. I remember the bus having to go slow to move through the sea of people so no one would get hurt. It parted like a sea. And never seen that many people in one place with my own eyes fighting for change. But at the same time, it also seemed so fragile. The bus parting the waves of people felt like someone with heavy boots trying to not step on anyone in a room full of cats. I silently hope that this will be a moment that I would look back on fondly at least, because something changed. There's a big sense of guilt because we grew up being told about the stories of being water hosed and tear gassed for, you know, fighting against Jim Crow and whatnot. And we were told that we would fight like that eventually one day, but we did very little protesting in our life. In terms of the Women's March, we kept an eye on the effects of it, but as you probably know, it was fruitless in its aim. It did build community, but Trump still got elected. Worse than that, when we did look into it, we found that there were a lot of people complaining that in terms of leadership from the women's marches, that a lot of cis women who were white were speaking over pretty much any other femme in attendance or who wanted to contribute to the movement. Leadership for any other type of woman was very hard. Fast forward to the Black Lives Matter protests, a movement we felt much more included in, and we felt much more like this was the movement in history that we were waiting for. Something that would change things, rock the foundations. But given where we were in our life, we still couldn't participate. We reaped the benefits of a following from being black at that time. At a time that black people's voices on the internet was much more cared about, even if only briefly. But we fear for our life if we protested. Having failed at society so much, having lost friends and made mistakes, being disabled and feeling useless to society, and clinging to the little pocket of a loud existence we seem to have, it just seemed like too much of a risk. We didn't have any friends we could count on for a buddy system, and we were a little bit too scared to meet new people just in terms of organizing, since we were so emotionally and mentally not okay. Just imagining the pain and terror of imprisonment, of being picked up by one of those SWAT geared officers, it hurt. And it was at a time that we remembered that fighting doesn't just mean in the streets. We reminded ourselves that not everyone can contribute in the same ways, and we resolved to make this, our content, our contribution. But is this much more than entertainment? A cool story explaining those shadow puppets and their machinations? Cool story, Bab. Now sit down and watch the show. I don't know. I don't. No. Maybe kids killing God in RPGs is a trivial occurrence, a result of power scaling, since saving the world from the cosmic and celestial entities would be a power scaling kind of thing. Because if you're fighting bigger and badder bogeys, then eventually you have to fight God themselves. It's a natural escalation. And given that these are stories about empowerment and self-discovery, you know, the quintessential RPG themes, it just leads to having younger protagonists, because coming of age stories are just ubiquitous regardless of medium. And young people aren't just easy to write for, but easy to organize a story around, especially to escape into, especially when you have the structure of school to use. Maybe these kinds of stories got popular and resonated because they're easy to escape into, and so they just become normal. Storytellers pursuing these themes and signifiers seemingly on instinct just because the stuff that inspired them did the same thing. Or maybe it's because childhood is a stage of vulnerability, and no matter how jaded you are, something about that speaks to being vulnerable and yet still trying to protect. Or maybe it's because childhood is a stage of vulnerability, and no matter how jaded you are, something about that speaks to being vulnerable and still trying to protect and help others. Especially for those who are routinely infantilized, being told they can't do for themselves or they don't do well enough to be considered, that they need to grow up. So many of us are still vulnerable, and we're very weak alone. And we're strong together. And because we're weak, sometimes the powers that be exert their power over us like a parent would a child, or like a god would a mortal. But we're stronger in our ragtag group of kids that seemingly have little in common, because our struggle is important. I like to think that the dream that people exude and give to others through killing God, through fighting for change against hierarchy, is something that won't go away. I like to think that it's not just a waste. But who knows? I'm gonna look around. You see what you want to drink and put it in the comments, okay? Oh, there was some stuff I forgot to say. Wait. They have garlic Cheez-Its! Yeah, the stuff from the video. I showed that Cosmic Star Heroine clip, but then I realized the main character had already chosen sides before the festival, but my point still stands. Though I wish I could have showed off the moment where she decides that her government was shit. But, be that as it may, she didn't have to defect, and things would have been chill for her if she didn't. And I think that was kind of the point I was trying to make. And how hard it is to push past being a stable adult when you know things are wrong. And the only when you don't fit in is when you have that pressure to push back. And it's like a lot of bravery when you do push back, even though you don't technically have to. Kind of like when white people stand up for Black Lives Matter. But maybe I'll try playing Cosmic Star Heroine again, now that we can fully appreciate it. We played Chrono Trigger, or Dust played Chrono Trigger recently, so I think we appreciate a lot more now. Though Chrono Trigger does have some problems. We should do some essays comparing them. Oh, and thanks again for listening to me. I really thought you were gonna walk away before we even got in. I hope I wasn't too boring. Oh, have I told you about my patrons? It's technically an essay, so I just gotta thank them. R2 Walker, Void Walker System, Value Customer, and Nova System. Even if they're not here, they're great. I just want to let you know. You can join our Patreon too if you want, but you know, you don't have to. Now, this essay was weird because I said JRPG a lot. We want to phase out saying that word, or at least diminish it from our vocabulary because of all the discourse about JRPG and how it makes Japanese developers feel bad. But I wrote this like a 1.5 years ago, and I didn't want to nitpick edit it all the way, you know? Because then we never finish it, and that's part of the reason that I was having such a hard time. Oh, I forgot to say, Junk is still in development, so if you want to play it, there's only a demo out right now, and the dev, Remy-chan, is working on a different game right now, which is kind of cool. It's called Fantasia. Great name, right? Funny thing though, the Junked, it actually inspired the essay in the first place, because it was just like such a strong theme, and then it made me think, oh wait, a lot of games have these themes, especially JRPGs. Did you choose a drink yet? I mean, take your time, no rush. I might get a pizza too. It looks like they have one ready. You can have a slice if you want. Don't worry about paying me back. You listened to my essay. It's a fair trade after all. But if you want to give me a Ko-fi later, link is in the description. Oh, while I was looking at the blankets again, while I was looking at blankets again, it made me realize the author isn't gay. But it did still have a gay awakening for us when we read it. Which I think makes sense, because it does cover some homophobia in that way of like showing someone being homophobic and then showing the face of someone who's totally not homophobic trying to like play it cool. And it definitely had some things that made us feel kind of queer. I mean, it had like more male nudity than female nudity actually, if I remember correctly. But I felt like I just needed to say that because like it's about a real person and I don't want people to assume he's gay when he's not. Or that they should read Blankets because it's a gay story and then get disappointed, you know? Though I do recommend reading it. Though it's as heavy as a dictionary, you could probably kill someone with it. Gosh, I wish Drizzle was able to get her killing Silent Hill segment in before we started editing. Drizzle was supposed to have a little moment where she talked about Silent Hill 3 and them killing God in that game, because, like, Heather's, like, pregnant with God in that game, and she's also a teenager, and, like, that game's a lot about, like, teenage girl anxieties and fears. So it really would have meshed really well. I guess Drizzle has to do the essay by herself now.
Hey! Hey! You nerds gonna buy something or just bitch about Chrono Trigger blankets all night?